Hello, everyone. Welcome back for this new episode of Secrets of Leaders. And today I am glad to welcome a friend, a very inspiring person, Professor Marek Kasperski. Hello, Marek.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here today. So you are the Vice President of Tony Buzan International. You're also the CEO of the World Memory Championships, and you worked with Tony Buzan for multiple years. You learned at the source, I want to say, in terms of brain sports, speed reading, mind mapping, and I think Tony Buzan really changed the world in a lot of different ways in terms of mental literacy. And for me, he was a leader figure, and that's why I'm really glad to have you here today to talk about him and how it impacted you or inspired you. But before talking a bit more about Tony, can you talk a bit more about you? Who are you, Marek?
Well, I live in Adelaide, in South Australia, but I travel all over the world, especially for teaching. I travel and teach mainly Tony Buzan's pet topics: mind mapping, speed reading, memory techniques. But before I met Tony, I was teaching adults. I've been teaching adults now in tertiary education for about 30 years. So I've seen teaching from various perspectives, and that puts me in a really good position to compare Tony Buzan's method of teaching, Tony Buzan's method of helping people, especially business people and business leaders. And that's very, very important.
And mainly through brain training, such as speed reading, mind mapping as well. And I think that's something you discovered through Tony Buzan, if I'm not wrong. And how did you meet him?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I met him at the Hurlingham Club in London, and we had a mutual friend, and we met at this beautiful club in London on the River Thames, and I had no idea who Tony Buzan was, so I had to try and remember his name because I just didn't know him. And it was an unusual situation because, of course, he was famous at that time. So it's like me meeting a president or a prime minister and not knowing who they were. And so when Tony talked to me, because I didn't know him, I would question him. I was like, "Oh, come on, Tony, don't tell me that. I don't believe that for a moment." Whereas other people would say, "Oh my goodness, it's Tony Buzan. I will believe everything he said." So that started us on a friendship almost immediately. We started on a friendship on an equal footing. I had many, many years, about 24 years of experience teaching adults in tertiary education, that we formed a bond. He started talking about mind mapping, and we became friends very, very quickly, and very good friends right up until the time he died.
And because, yes, he was in lots of different ways inspiring, what would you say you learned from him during all those years?
Well, I think the most surprising, I learned so much. We don't have 10 hours, so I can't tell you all the things that I learned from him. But the one that surprised me the most was the art of taking notes. Now, this is Tony Buzan's pen. After he passed away, I was given his pen, and it's a fountain pen, and I love using ink, and I love writing notes, and I feel writing is like information going from my brain through my arm into my pen and then on the paper. And I love that. So I would take notes. And he said to me, his exact quote to me is, when I was studying, I quickly learned that note-taking was effectively a way of teaching myself to be stupid. Well, you can imagine how I felt when he said that. I said, "What do you mean, Tony? Don't be silly." And he taught me about note-taking, something that everyone does. In business, when I'm at academic committee meetings in the degree program that I was in, I would take notes, lots and lots of notes. And he was saying, this is the worst thing you can do. He said, what color is your notes? And I said, well, they're blue because I use blue ink. He says, one color. I said, yes. He says, that's in Latin called monotonous. One color, monotonous. And I can still remember him saying it with all the theatre of this great man. And he said monotonous in English also means monotonous, boring. One color is boring. One color is something that is uninspiring. We should use many colors. He said writing notes is hard, whether you write notes with a pen or whether you write notes using a computer or a tablet, or it's hard work. And you write lots of sentences, and those sentences hide important information, keywords. You have to search for them. So if you're reviewing something, if you're a business person and you are looking for new important information, reading them is difficult, and that gets me onto speed reading. And taking notes is the wrong thing to do. We use keywords. Keywords are good for revision. They're good for remembering. Now, I have a mind map here. This is a mind map, and it represents about a 1 hour university lecture. And my students can review this, can do homework and review it in about 4 minutes. 4 minutes.
1 hour content in 4 minutes.
1 hour content in 4 minutes. So he very, very quickly taught me that note-taking is not ideal. I write with grammar. I still use Oxford commas. You know, I'm very old-fashioned because I'm old. And I still like writing, but it's inefficient. Now, when I was in China recently, I had to do a speech for 40 minutes, and that was my mind map for the speech. You can see there, it's from China, and I quickly summarized all the points I wanted to make. That mind map took me 5 minutes to build, and I only had to glance down while I was talking once or twice. And so it was engaging. I didn't break eye contact with my audience. And so for business people making speeches, important presentations, mind map is very helpful. So this is what I learnt from Tony. One of many things, because we spent time traveling around the world together. I went to his home on many occasions, and in West Wickham in England, and we had fun. Mind mapping is fun.
I love this story, and you're talking about doing a talk that as you did in China. And yes, Tony was a brilliant speaker. He also got recognized from the Toastmasters Association worldwide for being a great speaker. And I remember because in 2018 we did a talk together in Paris, and so he saw me on stage, and when I was about to go back on stage to do his introduction, he looked at me in the eye. He said, "You know, for you to become a better speaker, you need to talk more slowly." I said, "Oh, because yes, I tend to talk really fast," and it was not the case for him. He was really talking really slowly, and for me, it was quite surprising. And then I said, "Okay, challenge accepted." So I went on stage and I started to talk slower, which was uncomfortable for me because I tend to talk fast because that's the way I do naturally communicate. But then I realized by slowing down the way I speak, I would also have more clarity in my thoughts. I would hesitate less. I would talk less as well. I will speak with less words, fewer words, but with a clearer message. And I was like, okay, that actually works. And for me, it was a brilliant, short, concise, impactful leadership lesson, because leadership is also about communication. And I wanted to know if you also had yourself some anecdotes, some stories like this in terms of communication or leadership that you learned from working with him in that way as well.
Yeah, I do. I have many stories, but this one I think will help people that are listening to us. He gave me the 7 effects of public speaking, which I teach very, very frequently. And the first one is the primacy and recency. Primacy just means people will remember the first part of your speech, just the first few minutes. They will remember that much, much more than anything else. Recency means they will also remember the most recent things you've said. So when I make a speech to business people, I will summarize what I'm going to talk about in the first 3 minutes. And I use that primacy effect. If nothing else, they'll remember the points that I made. And then on my Apple Watch, it vibrates and it tells me I have 3 minutes left. So then I very quickly go into a revision. Well, this is what we learnt. This is what I wanted to tell you. And I repeat them because I know statistically people will remember more. Then there's the von Restorff effect. I say that because Tony always said it that way, and now I always say it that way. The von Restorff effect. And von Restorff just simply means say something that is different and people will remember it. So when I was in China in 2017, I was in Shenzhen and I had to make a speech. I made my speech in Mandarin, not English, because most people were in Mandarin. So I started off, and I went on to say, and I'll say it in English, I went on to say that I am going to teach you to remember 30 words in order that are not connected to each other. And by the end of my talk, you will remember the words in order and you can repeat them forwards and backwards. And everyone was shaking their head. That was a von Restorff statement, something that is so bold that people are going to remember. And they do remember. And I still get WeChat messages from my friends in China saying, I remember how you did teach me in 40 minutes the technique to remember 30 words forwards and backwards, and I still remember the words, and it was 7 odd years ago, and they still remember those words. I still remember those words. So it's von Restorff. And so in my university lectures, I would give a very unusual example, a von Restorff example, and it would wake people up, and they would remember. If I gave them something to read, they would forget the next day. So he taught me many things about communicating, making speeches, von Restorff effect. There were many others as well that I could go through, but we won't have time. But there were 7 effects that I like to give in speeches. If somebody asks me to make a speech, I did a speech online to 26,000 people, and I did the speech on the 7 effects of public speaking, and mind mapping was integral to that as well. So lessons from life.
You gave us 2. I like to work in threes. Can you give us like a third one, even if we can't get like the 7th one? Can we have like the third one of the 7?
Another effect of the most important graph is the association effect. Now, the association effect is very, very interesting. You will see politicians say things 3 times. Now, they're not doing it because they're being boring or they're trying to bring a very good message. They know, they are taught that if you repeat things 3 times, and this is important, and those 3 words are associated with each other, they are extremely easy to remember, and your message will get across to your audience. Let me give you an example. Shakespeare. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. In other words, friends who are Romans, Romans who are also Romans, countrymen who are also Romans. There's the association. Friends, Romans, countrymen are all associated together. So lend me your ears.
So the 3, they were the same people. They were, in the meantime, friends, Romans, and countrymen. But the using those 3 different words to describe the same kind of person will increase the impact of the message, if I get it right?
Yeah, it's just associating those 3 words with the message. So people remember that. Friends, Romans, countrymen. They remember that part of Shakespeare. I can't remember anything from Shakespeare because it's so hard to read. But people will remember those things. It's like Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States, in his great Gettysburg Address. He did the same thing. He said, our government, our constitution is of the people, by the people, for the people. It's a very famous phrase, but it's easy to remember because the association is people, you. The government is for you. It's by you. It's made of people like you, and people resonate to that. So repetition and making sure the 3 words are connected in some way makes it extremely memorable, which makes your speech, you are communicating effectively.
Okay, brilliant. So we have the von Restorff effect to surprise people. We have the association and the repetition, and
primacy and recency.
And yes, privacy and recency to start strong. And with this, we already have some tools to communicate better. But leadership is not all about communication only. It's also about working on yourself to help people grow, to grow yourself and to reach your goal. To what extent do you think those two that Tony Buzan was promoting, especially mind mapping and speed reading, to what extent those tools are helping the leaders to become better leaders? And I have in mind, for instance, leaders are readers. So yes, what is your vision on that?
Yeah, let's look at mind mapping first, and looking at leaders. I always, whenever I am told we are having a brainstorming session, the first thing I think about is I wonder if I can think of a good excuse not to go, because brainstorming sessions are boring. They're terrible. And Tony, I remember Tony teaching me about this, saying there must be a better way for leaders to get and encourage their employees, their partners to share. Now, think of a typical brainstorming session. I'll paint a picture for you. The leader, the senior person, is always the one at the front. And they're always saying, we're having a brainstorming session to do things better. And so that leader or a senior person, they are in charge. So that is a problem, because the people who are participating, they might be employees, they might be junior partners. They're afraid. They're cautious. They don't want to look stupid by saying, I've got an idea. And then everyone looks at them and say, are you kidding? That's a terrible idea. And then they're afraid. So they don't typically like to communicate this information to help the company, to help their leaders. They're very cautious. And then always there's somebody who is taking down information. What are people saying? Now, we know that people are cautious, so they're not saying much. They sit nice and far back and keep quiet and don't say anything. I'm not going to say I'm not going to lose my job. But the scribe, the person who writes all this information, they choose what to write and what not to write. And that is not helpful for our leader, for our business leader. And so Tony Buzan taught me there is a better way to do this brainstorming session. And what he suggested is every single person, without influence from the senior person, they do a mind map. Just a simple mind map. And they just write down their ideas, and they're told nothing is out of bounds. You can write anything you want, but use a mind map. Use key words, because when you think of one key word, you then think of associated words, and thus you get ideas. You become creative. And mind maps are amazing at helping you become creative. So the mind map way is for every single person to draw a mind map on their own. Then they get together in small groups and share their ideas. All good ideas, even bad ideas, are okay. And they consolidate 2 or 3 people into another mind map that is a reflection of a small group. Then those small groups get together and share their ideas. They remove everything that is repeated, which there'll be a lot. They put in all the different ideas. If there is an idea that is absolutely appallingly bad, then they may remove it. And then they present that to our leader, to our business person, who will then look at them. So there's no fear there. These are all the ideas. Mind maps have 4 major effects. The first one is imagination. It improves our imagination, and I can prove it. I'm actually participating in a scientific study where we are going to try and prove it scientifically why it happens. I think I know. I've just finished a course on neuroscience, and I think I know the answer. But we need to do this properly. Imagination. Second one, associations. I asked my students, I had 120 students in Guangzhou in China, and I said, what are all the things you can use a brick for? And they just had to write it down. I hadn't taught them anything. The average number of unique ideas was 7. I then taught them mind mapping over a number of days. And right at the end, I said, I want you to do one quick exercise for me. Do a mind map for all the things you can use a brick for. The average number went from 7 to 40. And my best student came up with 96 unique ideas in 10 minutes. So, imagination, associations. What do you associate a brick? Oh, it's heavy. It's heavy. Oh, I could use it as a weapon. I could use it as a doorstop. I could use it as a paperweight. It's heavy. I could use it to stop my car from rolling back. I could break walnuts with a brick, and so on. It just flows. Imagination, association, creativity. Now, companies like Apple, Samsung, Huawei, whoever they are, they want creative people. They want people who come up with all these fantastic ideas. So creativity in the world we live in at the moment is really important. So, and then the last one is memory. We can memorize things. I had, before I could speak Mandarin, this is an interesting story I think you'll like. I had a translator at that time. Her name is Na Zhang. And Na would translate for me, and she said to me, I don't understand how you can stand for 6 hours and talk and not look at a single piece of paper. I said, it's easy, you can do it as well. Now, I'll make this story short, but what I said to her is, I'm going to give you one word and just tell me everything you remember that's associated with that one word. If it takes you 5 seconds, that's fine. And I gave her the word bee, as in a bee that flies, gets honey, and a bee. She said, oh, you talked about a bee. You talked about how when it works with a flower together, they make something more beautiful. Synergy. Then you said, oh, the brain. We have right side of our brain, left side of our brain. We use those separately in most instances. And she said, oh, right side of the brain is color, rhythm, music, you know, things like that. Left side of the brain, mathematics, you know, architecture, drawing lines, engineering. She said, but if you work together, like the bee and the flower, something more beautiful will come out, and that is imagination. And she talked for 20 minutes, and I gave her one keyword. On a mind map, there could be 50 keywords. This mind map is about a book that I am writing. And this book, this mind map, summarizes about 50,000 words.
Wow.
Absolutely wonderful. Speed reading is the same. We have so much information that we now have access to. The internet has all this information. Some of it is good. Some of it is not so good. As leaders, we are in a position, and Tony taught me this, we are in a position where we need to make good decisions. And so what we read, if we just look on the first thing that we read, then it may be wrong. We need to read lots of information. And so being able to scan documents very, very fast is very important. Now, English is my second language. I didn't like English very much. Sorry to all the English speakers out there, but I struggled with English. So my reading speed was very poor. It was about 180 words per minute when Tony Buzan tested me. And after I learnt speed reading skills, although I didn't want to become a competitor and read 1,000 or 1,200 words per minute, I easily can read up to 700 words per minute with an 80% amount of understanding, comprehension. And Tony told me, your eyes do not read. And that was one of the occasions I said, Tony, you're crazy. Tell me you're joking. Please tell me you're joking. He said, your eyes do not read. And I said, Tony, that's rubbish. And so he did this. Jerome, I want you to read this very short paragraph.
Wait, sorry. Are we up? Okay.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Read it aloud.
Oh, I love Paris in the springtime.
Yeah. No. That's not what was written. What was written is, I love Paris in the springtime. Now, that might seem like a trick, and it's not a trick. It's a demonstration. When you looked at that, within a fraction of 1 second, your brain already knew what it said. So you just went through the motions. I already know what it says. I love Paris in the springtime. That's just one of many experiments I did. Tony told me, when you read a book, he says, look at one page for 1 second. Your brain will actually see all of those words. And again, I said, Tony Buzan, you are absolutely crazy. How can this possibly be true? And I'll be honest with you, I didn't believe him. For years, I didn't believe him. And so what happened is, when I was during my lunch break at the university, I love reading. I used to read about 2 novels a week, and the story was getting so intense, and I was just pages from the end, and I wanted to know who was responsible. It was a detective story, and I never read the last page. Never. I always read every page in order. But it was almost time to go to my lecture. So I opened the last page, and then I put it back down again. quick, open, down, less than 1 second. And then I thought, no, I'm going to read it later on the train on the way home. And I started leaving my office, and it occurred to me that I knew who did it. I looked at an entire page of text for less than 1 second, and I knew who did it. And from then, I realized how brilliant Tony Buzan was. So I have all these experiments because our eyes do not read, our brain reads. And that's why you said, I love Paris in the springtime, because that's what your brain understood when it saw all of those letters. You were just reading it because you were taught to read, and I told you to. But you didn't need to, because you could go like that and you know what it is.
Yeah.
So speed reading is very, very important for leaders to make good decisions, to make informed decisions. It's very important. Unfortunately, people make claims that you can read 20,000 words a minute. That means I could read this book in 3 minutes. I can't even turn the pages that quick. So speed reading sometimes gets a bad reputation, and it shouldn't, because speed reading, intelligent reading, is incredibly important now more than any other time in history. Every leader should learn to read at least 600 to 700 words a minute. It's not easy. You have to do the work. But after a relatively short time, I found it's now very easy.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. And now, thanks to speed reading, because also I was a very slow reader, but thanks to speed reading, now I'm able to read at least a book a week. And when you're a leader and you want to share knowledge, you want to improve yourself, I think knowledge is also important. So yeah, I totally agree. Beyond the fact that also you're training your brain. So with a trained brain, you have more abilities to make better decisions and to act faster. So that was very fascinating. Thank you so much. We have like 2 minutes left. Can you share in 2 minutes one of the I would say the hardest leadership moment you had to face, and how did you do it?
I did. I had a very difficult challenge. I had to negotiate a contract, a complex contract where different parties needed different things from the contract. They didn't align at all. And I was the person that negotiated that contract. Now, there is a method called the Polis method. And the Polis method is to get a person to say, I want a red wall. And the other person says, well, I want a blue wall. So we are not going to have a red wall. And the other person says, we're not going to have a blue wall. And the Polis method is to say, well, red wall person, what other colors would you consider? And they might say, well, I like purple, I like brown, and I like green. And then you say the same question to the other person. Oh, I like mauve, and I like green, and I like some other color. Oh, two of you would consider green, and therefore you can make that contract. I find that when I have a difficult contract that I have to negotiate, I use a mind map, because this helps me find not just the red and the blue, but other ideas. Colors was a simple explanation. But as I always say, if you want to catch a fish, think like a fish.
Thank you very much for this brilliant anecdote to conclude this interview. That was super enlightening. Thank you so much for for sharing this, all those stories about Tony Buzan, your hacks about how to become a better communicator with this, the 3 techniques, and also inspiring us into using more mind maps and also speed reading on a daily basis. I think after this episode, lots of people will start to train their brain, like brain athletes, with speed reading and mind mapping. So thank you so much for this.
One last thing, Jerome. Speed reading and mind mapping is like having a calculator for mathematics. It is a tool. We don't change the way we learn. We just learn tools so we can learn better.
Thank you very much, and people appreciated it. So yeah, thank you so much for that. We now practice my speed reading. Thank you. And yeah, so for people who want to know more about you and your work, they can go to tonybuzan.com. So where they will discover all you offer in terms of courses and lectures and all the events, including the competitions. And if people who listen are also interested into more episodes like this about leadership, you can follow us on Secrets of Leaders on Spotify, on Apple, on Google, well, everywhere. So thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thank you, Jerome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.